The Human Target, issue 10, Tom King writing with Greg Smallwood on the art. So, yeah, last issue was the Hiding from Batman issue, which ultimately Chance decided at the end, or realized at the end, that the reason why Batman's not coming is because Guy Gardner's not really dead. And that could, you know, that might mean a lot of things, including the Ice is lied to him and has deceived him in some way. And the first, because obviously the book starts with him drugging Ice to knock her out, so he's free to go and investigate this without her knowing. I thought, just before we get to the main part of the issue, I think the art here at the start, like the way he's giving her a drink and the way she's sort of like sipping at it and saying, "Oh, you tired old man," like even just the body language on this page is like off the charts in terms of like she's trying to keep this light and flirty, and he's obviously up to something because he's had this realization, and the way it's revisited at the end when he does confront her and reveals that you helped Guy fake the death, and Guy went along with it thinking that you might take him back in a couple of weeks. The look in her face as she realizes that he's found her out is like, comparing it back to that look where she's on page 2 taking the drink from him, because it's a very similar panel in terms of its framing. Just the facial difference between the two is absolutely fantastic. So I just want to shout that out before we even get into like how he gets this information, because obviously he's going off to see a Green Lantern about it. Which how do you pronounce this Green Lantern's name?
This is Nort.
Nort.
You don't say the G.
Yeah,
right?
I was wondering that.
So how much do you know about good old Nort?
How much? I have to say.
Okay, so just the quick broad strokes on Nort is created by Keith Giffen and J.M. DeMatteis for Justice League International. He was given a Green Lantern ring by a fake group of Guardians, right? So at this point, the Guardians are working with the Zamorans. There's a lot of stuff going on with them, and it was all part of this ploy by these fake Guardians to make the Green Lantern Corps as unstable as possible by giving rings to people that would know how to use them properly. So Nort ends up with it, and Nort is kind of this fumbling, dog-like alien that means well, right? But just can't get out of his own way. And he eventually becomes a full-time Green Lantern when he ends up assisting Guy Gardner with some Green Lantern help. And Guy vouches for him, and the Guardians end up giving Nort an actual ring. And because of this, they, give him menial jobs to go do, which we get a little bit here. Nort is this fan favorite character that, popped up in Justice League International, and then again in I think Giffen and DeMatteis did Justice League Antarctica, whereas all these Z-list characters, and Nort was in there, based, from the pages of Justice League International. So to see him pop up and work with the Human Target with Christopher Chance is just, a work of magic by Tom King.
Yeah, ultimately it's him going to Nort taking him to the Green Lantern records room, which keeps tabs on where all the Green Lanterns are and what their past has been. But there's a lot of great moments along the way, when Nort opens up the portal to go to Oa. There's just this great 3-page panel with Chance taking a drink, and then the light hitting his face as he's about to walk in, and then he walks in, and we don't see the portal, we just see him walk out a shot, out of frame, and it's just this greatly paced page. There's a lot of little, obviously the art's been fantastic in this book, so this is not a surprise to sit and praise little moments like this, but it's those little moments where it makes it feel like a bigger deal. It's okay, here we go. It feels like a big step for him to go through this portal because of the way the art frames it. It doesn't just feel like, it's just the next moment. It feels like, no, he takes this breath before he takes a step. He has one last swig of his drink and he steps out of frame. It makes it feel like just a big enough deal in the moment itself that everything just feels a bit more impactful as we're going through. Yeah. But so to get to this records room, there's some good stuff here that I like. How he looks up himself. He looks up Guy as well, of course, and gets the answers he needs. But he also has the choice of looking up Ace. And even though he thinks she might be, behind like some lies and deceiving him,
Yeah.
he still chooses not to look because he still feels that she's owed that trust. That would be breaking trust of a too high a magnitude. So it makes you like him a bit more. It makes you feel like he's got this moral code. He's got a line that he won't cross.
He understands boundaries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's really good. But the highlight of the issue, other than like his interactions with Ice, I feel, is probably the moment where he's done looking at his own record. That the you know, the Lanterns just keep tabs on everyone, and he admits that he's scared. You know, he's Nort's asleep on his shoulder. The panels are getting closer to his eyes, and he's like, this is everything I've ever done. All these like bullshit things I've ever done in my life. What's next? I've got 3 days left. I'm so effing scared. Like that. It's actually a really good moment because I feel like up until this point in the book, he's never actually just said that he's scared or that he's worried about dying. It's always been this detached, I need to solve the case, because time's running out, but it's never really felt like he's actually scared of death. Yeah. So,
he's finally at odds with his mortality. It's his job to die, right?
Well, yeah, but up until this
target.
But up until this point, though, there's always been this thing in the back of my head as I'm like, yeah, but is this one big long con?
Right.
Because he's the human target. He fakes his death. He pretends to die to get around things. But if he's in his narration thinking to himself, I'm scared of dying, if that's really what he's scared of here, technically, because he doesn't say he's scared of dying, he just says, I'm so effing scared. So you could interpret that.
Yeah, it's. I feel like it's a man at odds with his mortality, but also I feel like there's also a story about a man that's never really been in love, right? It's always been his work and his job, and that he was very good at it, and that's what he's done. But now Ice came around and has made him rethink everything, right? Because it's easy to be the human target when you don't have anybody to go back to, right? But now, like with Ice, he has developed this relationship, and now the fact that maybe she's taking advantage of this, and this is what he gets for opening himself up. And to me, that's also what scares him, is that he made himself vulnerable, and this is the cost of being vulnerable. Is knowing that the person that you opened up to is the one that's been playing you the entire time.
Yeah. And they go to Guy. He basically he assaults Guy with some peanut butter, effectively, because he's allergic to peanuts, and says, "You're going to tell me what you know, or you don't get the EpiPen." Effectively.
My favorite moment though is him on the ground with the peanut butter, right? Because he's choking, and Guy just giving him the thumbs up that he'll play. There's just something about the pacing, because up to that point, right, they go to a pool hall that's like 20 minutes away from where Guy's supposed death happened.
Yeah, he's not even hiding like in a different planet.
He's not even hiding anything. And Chance is like, we're gonna do this well, first Guy smacks Nort with a Green Lantern construct. And Chance is like, he's a good guy. He's just trying to help. And was that really called for?
I'll just say it. Guy's a little bitch because Guy basically agrees to fight without the ring. Fight without the ring. And then Chris starts beating the shit out of him. So Guy just immediately puts the ring back on to cheat and go back on his word.
Yeah. Yeah. He's very MJF in this, right? I'm not going to use the ring. He used the ring, right?
Yeah, and then, he crawls back to his superpower immediately because he's losing.
Right? And he makes the anvil, right? And it's such a cool construct. And Chance is standing there with his hand in his pocket, right? And then smacks him. And just again, there's a lot of talk about vulnerability that I talked about here, and that's what with Chance here talks about Guy not putting his peanut allergy. You're never talking about it because he'd be afraid of somebody exploiting that weakness because he has such an his masculinity is vulnerable, right? So just him smacking him, not even ending it with a punch, I think is a nice touch as well. Because it's a chance. Is I mean business. I'm not here to actually throw down with you. I'm here to get information. But yeah, and then because earlier we had seen him and Nort go to a pharmacy and drop something off, which I thought this is a nice touch too, because It was a prescription that he wrote himself because as one of his jobs, he was a doctor as a target. He kept the prescription pad, so he wrote himself an EpiPen. So this is what he makes the deal with, and that whole sequence I love. Him versus Guy, doing the coward's way out of using the ring after he said that he wouldn't, but Chance having a counter to that, to him saving Guy's life.
And not even just that, the idea that Green Lanterns will usually tell the rings their weaknesses so the rings can protect them if they see it coming. But the idea that Guy wouldn't tell the ring about his allergy because he's worried that it would make him less masculine.
Right.
Is
the insecurity.
perfect.
That's the word I was looking for. That I fumbled around. He's so insecure in his masculinity. He didn't even tell his ring about it to keep him safe. So that's how Chance is able to hit him with the peanut butter.
Yeah, but the final scene though, where Chance goes back to ice, and her that look in her face, that tells me when he confronts her with this truth, and she has that look as she says his name, Christopher. That tells me, and this is again how good the art is. That art tells me that yes, well, this is true. It's not because she is that. I see guilt in her eyes. I see someone who is upset that he's found out, not necessarily because the jig is up, but because she's aware that this is going to hurt his feelings. And whether or not she was playing him to begin with, I suspect that there was real feelings that were developed along the way. Whether that was planned, whether that was not planned, whatever. But it does feel like it's more complicated than just she was being a villain and going against them. And then you get the cap off with him saying, "Here's to us," which she said to him earlier before she passed out, because that's what they were. Because they were having a drink when she passed out.
And I love how pointedly he says, "Yeah, I drugged you for a couple hours so I could, I drugged you so I could get some time to talk to Guy." And she's like, "Oh, don't be crazy, he's dead." And that's when he just basically gives her the whole what he's found out, and that's where she gives him the Christopher.
Yeah, and you can feel that disappointment from him as he says, "Here's to us," because now there's this sadness to that statement because it's ironic. It's what we are might be a complete lie depending on what she says next. So as far as cliffhangers go, this is one of the most exciting cliffhangers, because if you're on the hook for their relationship as the driving force of this book, which it turned out to be, and I don't think we were expecting this when we started this book, but pretty clear by issue 2 or 3 that's effectively what the heart of the book is. Yeah, is this connection between them?
She's almost become an inadvertent femme fatale in that she had part of this plan and all this stuff, but I don't feel like it comes from a place of malice. I feel like she does feel bad for getting him caught up in this because he drank Luther's poison. That that wasn't meant for him.
Yeah, that's going to be the sort of thing where she fell in love with him, because at first it was about guilt, but then she sort of learned to love the person that she inadvertently got killed. Could be an interesting, way to play it. Yeah. But
he's just caught in the crossfire, and
but there's so much like that final page. There's so much subtext to the way he says, "Here's to us." The sort of the feeling of betrayal and confronting her with this information, and the anticipation of where it's going. You can feel his heartbreak, I suppose, over it, just in his eyes and in that sentence, because it's calling back to what she said earlier. All of that just crescendos amazingly in the ending. And I think that the ending, the start of the end, and then the scene where he's looking at the records on Oa, are 3 fantastic scenes that are some of the best stuff this book has done. What's so funny is that I think a lot of the stuff with Nort, because it's played for comic relief, I don't like as much as maybe most of the other issues. Yeah. So
it's hard to take him getting the dog drunk, right? On Oa, so he can get into the Hall of Records. That's not nearly as good as a lot of this other stuff that's going on. And then I don't want to say the background, because it's not the background, but like you said, the subtext of everything.
Yeah, I just, I think there's so much emotional weight to him admitting that he's scared finally, and then that last couple of pages where it all kind of comes together. I think just enough of the Nort stuff was comic relief, where he's thrown up on a guardian. It's amusing, don't get me wrong, but I don't love it as much as some of the other issues that have been just phenomenal all the way throughout. I think this was phenomenal in places, and then was just good for some of the rest of it.
I do love just though in those scenes on Oa, the green light over everything, right? Just because they are on there, and just the way that it plays with the shadows, like, right, he has this green light on from the folder that he's looking at, and when it pushes out on his eyes, when he says that he's scared, just the way that the shadow comes over his face, it's almost like a specter of death kind of deal, you know. So it's, you know, so there, like you said, there are some good things in there, but yeah, the Nort comic relief stuff isn't like, it doesn't bother me as much, but it's definitely not the strong point of the issue. So I got about halfway through, and I was like, all right, when is this picking up on the, you know, on the ice and him stuff? So
yeah, I think fun, and the guy scene was good. Don't get me wrong. So I think it's just a case of like the Nort stuff. Was it inherently interesting throughout as his confrontations with other members of the team that he's interviewed or talked to in the past?
Yeah.
But which is not to say it's bad by any means. I still thought the issue overall was great, and there's a couple of scenes that are absolutely excellent. But you know, some of the rest of it's a little bit under par compared to some of the other issues. Yeah. So, but obviously the art's fantastic. You know, once again the performances of the characters, you know, the acting, if you will, through the eyes, through the expressions on the faces is absolutely like the top of the class stuff that you can get right now. Yeah. So
hey, I've said it before. This is my favorite thing that I've read from Tom King, and I feel like a lot of it has to do with Smallwood art.
Oh, right? Very possibly.
Right. So.
Oh, I mean, we've got 2 issues left. I can't wait to see how it sticks the landing. I suspect it will stick the landing. I don't know how it'll stick the landing.
Yeah.
So, very fascinated to see how we wrap this up. But what are you giving Human Target issue 10?
I'm giving this a 9, a nice solid 9.
Yeah, I'm gonna go 8.5. It's still a great issue, and it still has some, arguably a couple of the moments are like 2 or 3 of the best emotional moments the book's ever had. But some of the Nort comic relief stuff was a little under the book standard, I would say, for me. So I'll say overall 8.5, but really good still.